Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
With Tech to the VO stars. George Whittam, founder of Source Elements. Robert Marshall, international audio engineer. Darren Robbo Robertson and Global Voice. Andrew Peters, thanks to Tribooth. Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Source Elements. George the Tech Whittam. And Robbo and AP's international demos. To find out more about us, check theproaudiosuite.com.
Line up, ladies!
Here we go.
And don't forget the code, TRIPAP200, to get $200 off your Tribooth. Now, we have a special guest today. MPA, known to us as Gomez from Waves, is here to talk about some simple... Well, let's put it this way. Plugins for people like myself, a simpleton when it comes to audio engineering. Simple people. Exactly.
Right brain, folks. Right brain. That's not simple, just right brain.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess that's where the premise for this episode came from, really, was about keeping it simple, because I was reading a Facebook post from a guy who was proclaiming the fact that he'd sort of been doing a session in a hotel room and hadn't bothered to build the pillow fort or do anything to negate the sound of the room, and then recorded his session and then used some sort of noise reduction plugin like Clarity, like, whatever, like RX, to clean it up. And my first thought was, well, you're making the plugin work harder than it needs to, and that means that you're going to end up with artifacts in the audio that you want to keep because you've got this thing working so hard. Whereas, I would prefer to hear, as an engineer, I would prefer to hear that you've done what you can to negate the room and then used a noise reduction plugin if you feel it is absolutely necessary to just clean up what little artifacts are left, because there's less chance of that doing any sort of damage to the audio that I want to use. But then also, for voiceover artists and people who aren't techie, the words ratio, attack time, release time, threshold mean nothing. So, how do you use these plugins? And I guess the reason for getting you on, Michael, was to sort of go, well, what can they do?
The thing with pillow forts from a pro point of view and an advisory point of view is people can actually go way over the top with those to the point that it degrades the sound.
Yep.
More is not better. And I say the same thing to somebody. It's like when I'm advising them and they say, well, we've been recording the voiceovers in the clothes closet. And I'm like, okay. And the result, they're like, well, it sounds really muffled and horrible and dead. There's no higher or mid or high frequencies. And I'm like, okay, so the first thing I want you to tell me is that cupboard filled with coats? If it's filled with things like coats, then and nothing else, then you're basically killing your sound. If it's filled with things that is a variety of different kinds of cloth and material, you've got a much better chance of it just stopping audio dead rather than absorbing it. You don't want everything absorbed. You want it not bouncing around the room. The other one that I always love is when somebody goes, yeah, well, I put pillows and stuff around me. And I said, well, where in the room are you? This is next to the window. And I said, you mean that floor to ceiling window in most hotels? Yep, that's the one. It's a beautiful view. I wanted to see the view. It's like, well, the view is killing you right now.
Bouncing off the window.
Yeah. So there are varying levels of problem that need to be looked at. And that's literally one of the first things that we do when we're helping somebody is go, not only tell me that, yes, you're doing a pillow fort or this, I want to know what kind of clothes are in those closet, not in a creepy way, but are we talking heavy winter coats? Are we talking big felt coats? Are we talking dresses, jeans? What are we talking about? How high?
But at some point, do you solve the problem acoustically so much that you don't need a Waves product? Or at what point is it like, okay, well, I can't actually bring in, or maybe I don't even want to go through the extent of flipping the mattress up on its side to put it along a wall?
Flipping a mattress, as far as I'm concerned, just says more like you're worried about an assassin. So nearly every single masterclass I do with my Waves hat on, I spend as much time telling people about the fact that I want you to use as few plugins as you possibly can to to making sure that you're just not overdoing things. And it's one of the biggest problems is that people throw plugins on with way too much kind of ease and breeze and, without actually really thinking about it sometimes. And that also degrades. So you have to really decide, is this plugin going to fix something, or am I just putting it on because I've heard it helps?
You don't hear it helps, but you heard it helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is too, Gomez, is that, you should exhaust all your options in terms of getting a clean recording before you even put a plug in.
Yeah.
Right.
To just open up the mic in the middle of the room and then go, oh, well, I'll just chuck a plug in on. You're going to have, in some cases, you're going to have to work that plug in so hard to get it cleaned up that it's to the detriment of the audio. Whereas if you've done everything you can, and then you only need a tiny bit of plug-in to get that tiny last few artifacts out of there, then that's a much better way of approaching it, right?
There's also, the positioning in a locality too of your face and your mouth to the microphone. Even when you're in if you're in a room that's really kind of echoey entirely, like a normal hotel room or anything that's got wooden floors, like this room, for example. I have no plugins on this because I didn't have time to put any on. But the simple reality is, the closer you get to the microphone, the more chance that you've got of mitigating some of those issues without putting anything on it at all. Yeah. And then you've got more of a chance of, okay, so what do I need to put on here? Clarity VX D-Reverb or Clarity VX D-Reverb Pro are definitely plugins that I wave a flag for. I mean, the amount of effort, the amount of years, and the amount of time that we put into them. And, people shouldn't buy them or try them just because somebody said years. There's just as many things out there that sound amazing that somebody created in a month. But we did that. There's so many samples that we fed into this AI, like hundreds of thousands. And because of that, the result is it really works. But again, like any plugin, you can't overdo it. So my best suggestion with a plugin like Clarity VX D-Reverb in a hotel room or an office or somewhere where you are that is not your ideal place or the place that is take it all the way to the extreme and then pull it back.
Just a quick question for you. So if I was in a position where I couldn't actually manage the room that well, I've done everything I possibly can to control whatever artifacts, particularly reverb in a hotel room or whatever. If I use Clarity VX D-Reverb, is it destructive? So when I'm sending the file off to an engineer, can they?
That depends on your routing and what platform are you using it in? Like how would you be setting it up?
Well, I'm just saying, like if I give it too much,
is it going to do damage to the audio? Yes,
Correct.
You will do damage to the audio. Yeah. Like anything over compressed, over noise reduction, or overuse of noise reduction. You can even over EQ, really.
Yeah,
definitely.
Anything like that, because you're fucking with the audio. So you're changing the audio. Yes, it's, as Gomez said, hundreds of thousands of samples. But if you make it work too hard, it's got no choice but to start eating into the audio you want to keep. I would presume, Gomez, is that?
Oh, absolutely. Which is why I say take it all the way to the extreme and then work your way back.
Yeah.
You want to, and by the way, I give that advice for pretty much every plugin. It's like, if you really want to know how to use subtractive EQ, go to the extreme and then move your way back. Same with, compression and everything else. But with something like an AI powered de-roomer, which is effectively what Clarity VX D-Reverb is, it cleans up the noise and the reverb in the room. You are going to get to a point where you're basically saying, okay, I've taken it out of automatic mode and I'm just going to get what it gives me on extreme, and it's going to kill your audio file. However, I will tell you that it's very, very hard to do that in Clarity, any of the Clarity plugins, because way back when we released Vocal Writer, remember Vocal Writer?
I use Vocal Writer all the time.
Okay, so Vocal Writer was one of the first plugins that we ever designed and developed that was focused specifically on identifying the the frequency range and spectrum of a human voice. So if you put Vocal Rider on like a drum, it's not going to work as well as a human voice. It's not even going to know what to do with it. You put it on a guitar, same deal. It's not going to know what to do with it. This is also why we then released Bass Rider, and then we focused that on the spectrum and frequencies for bass. Now, going back to Vocal Rider, that was our first jump into that field of, okay, so we want this to only understand what's going on with the human voice. Now, let's move forward to 2021. 2022, when we released Clarity VX. This is very, very much designed around the human voice. And we've actually created it in such a way that it's hard to really mess it up. But depending on how much noise you've got and how bad the room is, especially on the pro version of the plugin where there's more to tweak, yeah, you can over dig yourself into a hole. With the simple one with just a big knob in the middle and a couple of small switches, it's really hard to mess it up.
Can I ask you, when does it become, when does it go from being reverb to being resonance or maybe early reflections, right? Because there's a certain point where reverb is, the sound, the artifacts or the room itself, when it gets to a certain size, maybe less than, 6 by 8 feet or something. Reverb no longer is the same problem anymore. Now you're dealing with like pressure zones
early
reflections. Yeah. Are we getting to the point yet with AI where we can start actually dealing with that stuff too? Because that's you sound like you're in a tube. You sound like you're in a box problem. Are we getting to the point where we can fix that too?
I figured that's part of the room, part of the de-reverb.
Yeah, it is. It is part of the room and de-reverb. It totally is. We can fix that.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it's much more complex than just a reverb tail.
Well, that's always been the problem. Most other, there's been various de-reverb plugins out there. And to be honest, what I used to use before Clarity came out with a de-reverb is you just take a Waves C4 and you put it all the way on expand. And you can tweak each frequency band and you can kind of sit on the tail. But none of the other products out there could get rid of the early reflections, which were really the telltale sign of you being in a small space.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah.
There's a lot you could do with Clarity VX, just the noise fixing plugins. But with de-reverb, we went all the way, and it's down to the little nuances of reflections as well as the big tails and everything else. It's like we want to make you sound like you're in a room that has no reflections.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why one of the controls you have is basically controlling the presence of the plugin. So, and it kind of takes your voice and makes sure that, you're telling the plugin, okay, so now that we've cleaned up that noise, I want you to take my voice and focus more exactly on that. And then the plugin will go, okay, right. So now you're in a cleaner room and you've got the ability to take your voice and put it right out front. So the other thing that you can do is you can basically choose which neural network you want to use. So if you're doing spoken voice, pick one for spoken voice. If you're singing, then use that neural network. You can choose whether you want stereo or whether you want mono. So if it's just a voiceover and that's it, then you can actually tell it, okay, I'm just dealing with mono single here. So, and it's going to work in a different way, but it will clean it up really nicely for you.
It's funny though, because it is quite subjective, because I do remember I was away in April and I obviously had to work while I was away in some pretty weird environments. And I sent a file to Robert, and I sent the same file. In fact, I think I sent it to all three of you, George and Robbo. I got feedback from Robbo, and I said, would you use that? He said, yeah, I'd use that. And I got one back from Robert saying, I wouldn't be happy if I received that. So to me, that is a sign of the whole thing being a bit subjective as well. Some people have no problem with it, and some people have a major problem with it.
Audio is subjective, I guess, in its own, but it just in and of itself, audio is subjective, I suppose. But
yeah, but the question, of course, is, so if that's the case, would I use it for Robbo? No. Would I use it for Robert? Probably.
It also depends. It also depends on your listening environment. I mean, I can tell you that if I'm listening to something in this room in this home studio through my speakers, then it's going to sound different to if I'm in British Columbia at EA Sports in their mastering studio. And the same voiceover would sound probably completely different because they're listening to, there I'd be listening through PMCs. And here I'm listening through Adams. So,
and they're in a very expensive room, I would guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's EA Sports has, I think, about 28 rooms right now.
Yeah, I heard the video game industry is doing okay. Like, there's a budget these days.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's
Their audio rooms are insane. It's so when a company like EA Sports stops calling itself a headquarters and calls itself a campus.
Right. That's right.
Welcome to the Voodoo Sound Campus. Can I just say too, by the way?
Yes. Campus is a row of tents.
Yeah, campus is a row of tents. Let's have a look at something else. If I'm speaking of games, say I'm a voiceover artist and I've just finished recording an hour or so of gaming voiceover, and I look at the file and I think, oh shit, that's a little dynamic. And for whatever reason, God knows why, but I feel like I should put some compression on it. But the word ratio to me means nothing, and attack and release time. What's a good one for that?
Something really transparent and relatively hard to screw it up too badly.
Yeah.
Well, everything you want everything to be the best edit that you never heard. If somebody is listening to something and going, "Oh, there's a plugin on that," then you failed.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So the term "the best edit I never heard" is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. I stole it off you.
So you did, didn't you? Yeah,
I did.
Yeah,
I did indeed.
So now that I've said that, I forgot what you asked, Rob.
So something like, my thought would be Arvox, but you guys also have all the one knob series and all that sort of stuff. For someone, a compressor in the hands of somebody who knows nothing about what they're doing but needs to put a tiny bit of compression on something. What's a good one?
In that case, yes, Arvox. So in Studio Rack, I have a chain that I save, and it's just my voiceover chain for this specific microphone. And the first plugin on it is Clarity VX D-Reverb. The second one is Arvox, and the third one is One Knob Brighter.
Such a good plugin.
Which one?
Sorry, let me say it in another accent. One Knob Brighter.
There you go.
Yeah, Vitor Gomez has moved back to Australia now. There you go.
One knob brighter.
Brighter.
One Knob Brighter is such a good plugin. And I think we've talked about this before, but Slate Digital do a similar one, Fresh Air, but they're both equally good. And I guess I suppose like Clarity and all the other noise reduction plugins, each seems to have their own sort of niche that they work best in, I suppose. I think you're right. I think One Knob Brighter on voice is awesome, but Fresh Air across a mix for me just gives that little extra bit of sheen.
Oh, absolutely. And Fresh Air is, I nearly look at Fresh Air as something that's more comparative to something from us that would not be anything to do with restoration or EQing of any kind. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's there's a plugin which I'm trying to remember the name of, and good God, I can't remember it for my life now. But it lets you adjust the width of each of the your frequency groups, like low, mid, high, lets you mono them or stereo them. And I'm embarrassed that the product name has gone out of my head. But yeah, that's the one that I usually compare more to the Air one from those guys.
When do you make the leap from Clarity VX D-Reverb to D-Reverb Pro?
Realistically, if you're not producing the audio yourself, then from my perspective, Clarity VX D-Reverb is totally good for you. That's kind of what you need, right?
Yeah.
If, however, you are taking on and you're doing post-production and you're dealing with everything that's coming in from multiple voices, multiple places, and you've got a multi-track in front of you, and you're dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, then that's when Pro comes in, because that's where you have the ability to control the tail more. So you can smooth out the tail. You've got independent knob rather than just a simple fader for presence. You've got the ability to, you've got something that we call a strength multiplier. You've got the ability to go into every single part of the frequencies and choose which ones you really want the plugin working on and which ones you don't.
Is that EQ curve looking thing across the middle?
That's the one
of the graphic.
Yeah, the one that says strength and frequency.
Right.
Yeah.
So effectively, that's exactly it. It's a strength and frequency. It's like, okay, rather than just a knob, what we did was go, okay, right. So we're dealing this for the seasoned post-production guy, or somebody of that ilk, going, okay, so this is where that room is. Let me focus all that and bring out. I don't want much of the strength on that part, but I do over here between 3 and 8K.
It's very tweaky.
Oh, it is very. Now,
but like if you were trying to match, like if you had 5 different sources and you wanted them to sound like they're literally in the same space, sounds like the level of tweakability you would want to have.
Absolutely. But if you're a voiceover, or you're somebody that's doing your own stuff and you're doing it or you're doing a podcast and you've got a guest coming in and they're on their MacBook Pro microphone and they're sitting in a kitchen on a tiled floor with a window behind them. And that's the kind of thing where honestly, just use the normal one with the one big knob in the middle. It's like a lot of plugins. You can get yourself into a hole really quickly unless you've got the expertise to be able to deal with it, which is also why we released 2 versions of these. One of them is a quick fix, and by quick fix, I do not mean degraded quality at all. It's exactly the same neural engines, but it gives you less tweakability so that there's less risk of you messing it up yourself. And then, then you've got Pro, which has more tweakability, plus a limiter built in, plus width control, plus tail smoothing, plus the ability to get more neural networks and an analysis of both mono and stereo. It gives you a lot more.
Yeah.
That was just part 1 of our chat with Michael Pearson Adams, or Gomez, if you like, from Waves. We'll be back next week for a continuation of this conversation, and we're also tapping into something which is kind of topical as we age, because some of us are doing that. We'll be talking about hearing loss and how best to manage it when you do this for a living. So join us next week. More chats about hearing, more chats about plugins, and more chats with Michael Pearson Adams from Waves. See you next week.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite, with thanks to TriBooth and Austrian Audio, recorded using Source Connect, edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging, with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.